Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP.
Welcome
and
to
now,
the We Are
Casey
VIP
Hasten.
podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And you know it is my intent to bring you thought leaders, people that are going to provoke your thinking and help you to make better decisions. So who better than to do that? Today on the show, I'd like to welcome Gerard Ibarra, consultant, author, speaker, and serial entrepreneur. Gerard helps companies make strategic business decisions that enable growth. His insights help leaders have a better understanding of the totality of every decision. He shares these insights in his new book, Good Decisions, Better Outcomes, and is here today to share some of that knowledge with our audience. Gerard, welcome to our show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And you know, it's so interesting. This is like a real life example, right?
Yes.
I always talk about the importance of networking and, you know, why it's so important to feed your network. So tell everybody how we got connected.
So we met at the Legacy Connect. It was a networking at 12 Cuts, and we were just talking, and we started talking about some theoretical things. I don't know why. It's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go talk about theory, and then one thing led to another, and we really hit it off and talked about the decision-making process, and that's how we connected and stayed in connection.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to dive into the meat of your book, but I do have to say, because I know everybody thinks I'm a nerd already, but I mean, we weren't just talking about theories.
No.
We were talking about quantum physics.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Like, who am I talking with here?
Right? And I'm like, and I have no degree whatsoever in that, but I'm just so fascinated by it. So I love it when I meet people that have more knowledge about it than me. So thanks for going down that rabbit hole with me.
Anytime.
So let's talk a little bit about decision making. I think that, you know, it is so critical that, you know, we don't always have to make the right decision, but we have to know why we make the decision, right? So, and you're an expert in this, in making informed decisions. So how did you gain this knowledge over the years?
So it's a process, a framework that I learned back in the mid-90s when I was going and getting my master's. And then from that time, I'm like, everybody should be doing this. This is a great framework. And I started using it at UPS when I was still working there. And then I used it in my consulting practice when I went for my PhD. So it just continued growing from there, and I've used it in real life experiences as well. So it's just evolved from 25 years ago.
And I forgot that you were a PhD. What did you get your PhD in?
In systems engineering.
Smart guy.
No. Thinking totality. So that's what it's all about.
Thinking totalities. I like that. Okay. So making decisions can be so difficult for leaders, especially leaders that are new to their roles. You know, why do you think this is?
So some of the new leaders, I guess, they might have problems in making decisions only because they don't want to make a wrong decision. So they'll step back and just wait until things start falling more and more into place, and they, at the end, might make a decision. But a lot of times, those who are new leaders, who want to make sure they make the best decision, they may not make the decisions up front, and that ends up costing them more at the end because they didn't make a decision when they needed to make the decision.
Oh, that is so good. And I think, you know, I can be guilty of that as well. What's it called? Analysis paralysis or
yes.
paralysis by analysis?
Something like that, yes. Yeah.
And you just overthink it,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the problems. You only have so much time to make a decision. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is you can't continue going down that rabbit hole. Well, what about this? What about that? Or do you need to think about this? Like, no, stop, time out. You've got to put an end to it. Because if you really think about it, if you're choosing between, say, 3 vendors, and a year later you're about to make a decision, you might have a new vendor in the mix. You might have a new company. Something might have changed. So making decisions on a timely basis is also very important.
So I have an interesting scenario that I want to share with you. Just happened today.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And this is related to our candidates because like right now our candidates are, it's a crazy market out there and they have multiple opportunities that they can choose from, right? And now we're seeing candidates that are kind of being coerced to make quicker decisions instead of slower decisions because the companies don't want to lose them because they know they've got multiple offers. So how would you advise someone who's sitting there with multiple offers about to change their life, so to speak, by taking a new job? What would you advise them to do as far as that decision-making process?
So for them, the ones who are going to be making a decision on a job, think about long-term. Mm-hmm. What are you going to be doing 3, 5, 10 years from there? Is that a company you want to be with for just a year, 2 years? Or do you foresee yourself growing with that organization? So you got to think about the down the road, 3, mm-hmm. 5, 10 years, not just what's going to happen tomorrow or next year, nothing like that. You got to think long term.
That's perfect advice, and I feel like I did a good job today with my candidate now, so thank you. Because one of the things was like the industry, that one of them was an industry that if you go into this industry, you're going to get very niche, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, you need to think about, is this an industry you want to be in for the rest of your career? And so I had her make a list of pros and cons.
Good.
As to, what would make her happiest.
Good.
And when at the end of the day, when it came back, the one that she was happiest with was not the one that paid the most money.
Good.
I know.
No, that's really good. That means that she really thought about the totality, those systems thinking, and that she thought about it long term as well. So that's good. That's very good advice, and I'm happy that she made that decision.
Me too, especially because it was for my client. So, all right. So what does it mean to make an informed decision?
So that has a lot of meanings, but I think what it comes down to is, do you have all the information you need to make a decision? You can't make a decision based on just partial information. You can't make a decision based on information that may be conflicting. Mm-hmm. Those are really hard decisions to make. So when I talk about, or when you talk about an informed decision, it's having everything in front of you and making a decision based on all the data that you have available.
When do you stop?
When do
you decide you've got all the data?
So there's something called the, optimal stopping in algorithms, and it's in computer programming. And the way it goes is, if you want to spend maybe 30% of your time searching, mm-hmm. and then the other 67% or 70% of the time making the decision. It's actually
Okay.
1/3, so 33 and 67%.
Okay, perfect. And so that's an informed decision, but what are some traits of a bad decision?
Oh, there's many. Gee, there's quite a bit. I think the one that's the most prevalent in making bad decisions is allowing your emotions to take the best of you. And that's some of the things that happen. We're human. It's innate to us. So if I had to think here for a second, I said, how do you make bad decisions? Definitely letting your emotions take over. Bad decision. You want to keep those in check and don't let them convolute your entire thinking process. And another way of making bad decisions in the business world, and the emotions also goes in the business world, but another way of making bad decisions is something that's called the, status quo. It's
Mm-hmm.
a decision trap. And that means that you don't want to make a decision because everything is working out fine. Why go down there and rock the boat? But if you don't do that, if you don't go investigate what's going on, you may be leaving millions of dollars on the table.
Okay.
Only because you say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a bad connotation. So that's one way businesses might make those bad decisions, or not make the decision, I guess.
Okay. What are some other traits that we might look for, like maybe from a job seeker's point of view?
So from a job seeker's point of view, I would definitely look at see the organization, mm-hmm. and see their culture, because we live in a society where that means a lot, and mm-hmm. it always has been, but it's more pronounced today. And when you're making those decisions, you got to allow your emotions to be in there. I'm not saying that let them take over you, but definitely you want to see what the culture is. Do you fit in the culture? Do you like the culture? Because if you make a decision based solely on money, mm-hmm. and you're going to go there and work every day and you don't like being there, first of all, you're going to be miserable, but second, you're not going to be producing at the level you need to be producing.
Exactly. And also, and this is one of the things I tell my candidates all the time, I tell them, I don't want to make you hate your life by getting you a job you're not going to love. So you got to talk to me. We've got to talk about what it is that makes you happy. And so there's a lot of things that people don't take into consideration when they are, and especially right now as we're getting through this pandemic, a lot of people will say, well, I'm okay going back to the office, but that's not really what they want, even if the office is requiring it. And so I think that trait, not being true to what you really want, could be a trait of a bad decision.
Right.
So.
And just to add a little more to that, I mean, when it comes down to making that decision, there might be a point where you have to eat. And if you get to that point, there's no let me have my emotions. No, you got to put food on the table.
Exactly. And, and that's another thing that I talk a lot about with my candidates, especially those that are unhappy in the role that they're in, even unhappy in the career that they chose. That was me, by the way. That was me. And I really want them to step back and not leave that job.
Right.
But if possible, maybe start a side hustle.
Yeah.
And then work it so that your side hustle becomes your full hustle, right?
Absolutely. No, that's a good point, because I do mention that in the book, and I do talk about if you need to make a decision and you don't like where you're at, do that side hustle. I don't call it side hustle. I say, being an author or teaching at night, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go down that route. Absolutely.
Well, and I think it's so important too when you're making decisions. Like for me, I made a huge decision when I decided to move from accounting to recruiting. And
very big decision.
At some point, I just had to jump off the ledge and do it. I had to quit thinking about it, quit thinking about the reasons, why I shouldn't be doing it, because I really wanted to do it. And I knew that I was going to be able to change people's lives and help them. So I think learning when it's okay to make that leap is also important in the decision-making process.
Yes. For you, having that passion, that goes a long way in itself. So making that leap from accounting to recruiting, which is a big leap in my opinion.
Huge.
That's just me saying, but yeah, it's understanding who you are, who you really are, and it's okay to make a decision solely based on emotions. We're humans, and if you make a decision without any emotions, in the end, you're going to be very miserable, and it's not going to work out for you.
Well, okay, so that leads me to my next question. Let's dig into the emotions a little bit. So why is it important to understand how your emotions impact your decision-making process?
So there's something that I call the trifecta influencers, and it's your needs, wants, and emotions. And so your needs are the most basic thing. That's something that is a necessity for you, like water. But a want, on the other hand, is something that you would like to have. So I have 35 t-shirts, I want a 36. I don't even know why I want a 30, because it brings me satisfaction. And your emotions is what creates your wants. So if you didn't have any emotions, you wouldn't really have any wants, then everything for you would be based on a need. So emotions are very important, and if you don't keep them in check, if you don't understand how much they play a role in your decision-making process, you might go down the wrong route there.
And I think too, especially for leaders,
yes,
and even people that are working for other people, I think it's so important that you really I always tell people to take a breath, before you say something, because if you don't, then, and you say something out of haste, or you make a decision out of haste, it could have a negative impact.
Yes, absolutely. So that emotion taking over is your emotions telling you what you want to say. And it's also systems one thinking, which is fast, efficient. I don't like to think about things. I'm just going to say what comes to mind or what I think I saw or read. So yeah, you want to keep those in check, because you can make a very poor decision based on the emotions almost off the cuff, and then you'll regret it a day later. Even something as simple as an email, you're frustrated, you type it up, and then you hit send.
And then you're like, whoops.
What did I do there? So that's systems one thinking. It's fast, efficient, and that's where that's where humans like to be. We don't like to think critical. We don't like to concentrate. That's just too much for us.
That is absolutely too much for me. I've got all the assessments to prove it.
Makes two of us, and I wrote a book on it. Why am I doing this?
So, and I kind of want to go back to the take a breath, because, there is so much science behind the fact that breathing helps you regulate your emotions.
Yeah.
Did you touch on any of that in the book?
No, I didn't. So on mine, it was a little bit more quantitative because the book that I wanted to write was more on the quantitative side. Here's a number at the end as far as what decisions you should make. So if you had to choose between job A, B, and C, with my process, you'll have score for A, score for B, and score for C. You would choose the highest one.
Okay.
And emotions would be part of that decision-making process.
Oh, I'm really sad I haven't read this book yet now because it sounds like I need it. So for those of our listeners that collaborate with others, how can you get your colleagues and peers on board with the decisions you make?
Oh, so, a lot of that is finesse, but it's also getting down to the point where they, your colleagues, understand systems thinking. And if you understand systems thinking, what it comes down to is you're making a decision for the totality of the organization, not for the finance department, not for the operations department. And once those individuals start understanding how you think and how this process works, it's going to be easier for them to fall in. Oh, I understand why. Systems thinking.
Okay, and I know we kind of talked about systems thinking earlier, but kind of run me through that just one more time. Systems thinking.
So, in a nutshell, if I had to put it in a couple of words, it's getting the big picture.
Okay.
If I'm going to make this decision about going with this employer, how's that going to affect my family? How's that going to affect my future? How does that affect other things around my life? Am I going to have time for my children, for working out, for going on vacations? Am I going to have time to go back to school? So you got to think about everything that ties into that one decision. How do the extremities affect it, the environment around it? So that's systems thinking, and it's there's a whole degree on it. I got my PhD on it. I mean, there's a whole lot more to it, but in a nutshell, it's thinking about the big picture. How does your decision affect other parts of your life, other parts surrounding that product or that decision?
Okay, this is going to be a real corny example, but I want to tell you what I got out of that.
Oh my gosh.
So here's what I'm thinking. And I have this argument with my boyfriend all the time about straws.
Okay.
So his decision is to not use straws because he's doing his little part to save the environment. I personally love to drink out of straws. So I feel like that decision that he's making is part of a systems thinking because he's thinking about the bigger picture, like our economy, or not our economy, but our environment.
Yeah, so what I would say to that is the way you might think about it is that I don't like drinking out of a glass because it might have been washed. A straw is a little bit more sanitary, so I know it's clean. A straw keeps me from dripping down on my mouth. So
right.
Drooling, so if the water falls on the table, now you have to get something to clean it. So, yeah, and then you could also say, I'm going to reuse this straw. I'm going to wash this straw and put it aside. I'm going to reuse it. Or get one of those things when we're growing up, so the silly straws. Remember those?
Oh, yes, the plastic
the
ones.
The plastic ones. You have fun.
That's a good idea. Okay, so let's say I've made a really good decision. I know it's the right decision. So how do I assess this to make sure that I can inform future decision-making processes?
Well, that's a hard question because so the framework that I talk about is to help you be more efficient in your decision-making process so you don't waste tons of time. According to McKinsey, they did a survey of 2,000 managers worldwide in 2019, and they learned that a typical Fortune 500 company loses $250 million a year in just making decisions. Not whether it was a good or bad decision, just in the decision-making process. So my framework tries to streamline that and make it a little more efficient, and it also helps you select what might be the best one. You don't know if it's the best one, but your likelihood of getting the best one is a lot higher than just flipping a coin or going through there. So it's very hard to do that, but with the framework, you're more than likely going to select a better solution than not selecting one where you just flip a coin and stuff. Gotcha.
So, and that kind of really leads to my next question. I think one myth that leaders sometimes believe is that a strategic decision-making process needs to be lengthy. How can leaders make quick decisions so that they're not losing $250 million?
So one of the things that leaders could do, or any manager, is continue learning, continue educating yourself. Because when you come to being, I guess, a gut feeling or off the fly, it's not really something that's that you're guessing at. It's really based on everything you've learned, read, seen, heard. So the more you know, the more you've learned, the more you're exposed, the better your decision is going to be, the quicker one you can make. So making those decisions that are a little bit more, I guess, immediate, then the more training you have, the more experience, exposure, the more effective your decision will be made. So yeah, I highly recommend that they continue educating themselves and growing in their business and in their field.
I love how you just explained that, because I actually interviewed a gentleman who says, never trust your gut. But you're saying kind of the exact opposite, and you give such a great reason why, because this is, call it intuition or whatever you want to call it, but it's your learned experiences that you're basing that decision on.
So Daniel Kahneman, he's a Nobel Prize winner. He wrote that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he talks about your gut feeling, or the, go with your gut. He says it's not really your gut, it's from what you've learned, seen, heard. It's kind of like if you're an elite football player, there are things that you've learned throughout the years as far as if someone's going to tackle you based on their emotions, that how they look, what happened in the previous play. These are all things that you've accumulated, and it just becomes part of you, so you become a better player. You can't just really learn that in some manual. So yeah, it's not really going with your gut. You're going with what you've learned.
Yeah. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, get curious.
Yeah.
Get curious and
get
just
curious.
Try to learn something new, but get curious about everything, and that way, you're going to be exposed, and this information is going to come to you. I'm curious about quantum physics. That's why somehow
I was hoping
conversations will always turn to that. So, I'm so curious. We're not going to talk about quantum physics. In fact, we're almost out of time. So I want to. Is there anything else about decision making that I haven't touched on or asked you a question about?
No, I think the biggest thing is. When you're going to make those difficult decisions, leave you with two things. One is find a time when it's best for you to really sit down and concentrate. And speaking scientifically, the best time to do that is at the start of your day. So if your start of the day is in the morning at 8 o'clock, then that's when you want to do it. If it's at 7 p.m. at night, that's the time you want to do it, so that you really focus. According to science, that's when your brain is really hitting its most. And the other thing is, think about your exit strategy. Kind of like we talked about earlier, what are you going to do 3, 5, 10 years from now? If you're purchasing a product, a home, or moving, or a business, what happens in the end? So those are two takeaways I like to give you and the audience. So.
I love that. I'm going to go home and think about my exit strategy. I don't think I'm going to get to go anywhere for a while. But.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, we are at the point in our show where we ask you our 3 VIP questions.
Oh my gosh.
Are you ready?
I think so. I'm nervous now.
Okay, so my first question. If you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you take with you?
So I would take 3 people.
Okay.
I would take my wife, because she's very logical.
Good one.
And yes, make the right decision.
Yep.
No, I mean, she's very logical, and she would just be a wealth of information. The other 2 would be my godson and my niece.
Oh.
We're very different in some areas, and they're a lot of fun, so I wouldn't mind having them around, and we always get along really well. So it would be a party for me.
Okay. A permanent party.
A permanent party, exactly.
Okay, so this next question, boy, you just queued this up so well.
Okay.
What is one thing you do each day to set your day up, or each morning to set your day up for success?
For me, the first thing I do is I pray when I get up. Very first thing I do. And then next thing I do is I exercise.
Okay.
So those 2 things, I get those going, and then after that I know it's before my start of my day, actually. So my start of the day is at 5. It's not really work, it's let me prepare myself for the day work.
Yep.
So
I love that. I'm all about having a morning ritual.
yes.
All about it. And people are like, why do you do that every morning? And I'm like, because it gets me focused.
Yeah.
It clears my head. And and I have my quiet time in the mornings, and then I journal and I do all that, and I don't exercise, but don't tell anybody. Not in the morning.
No one will say anything.
Okay, my final question.
Okay.
If your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
I would say always positive and never giving up. So
You know what? I can see that about you.
always being positive,
Yeah.
Never give up.
How do people find you?
So they can find me on my website at Gerard, GerardIbarra.com. And if they like to learn more about my process, they could purchase the book, Good Decisions, Better Outcomes. It's available on Amazon. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you want to learn more, just drop me a line. I'll be certainly happy to speak with you.
That is so awesome. And we'll make sure and include that in the show notes as well. And by the way, I do have your book queued up to read.
Oh, great.
It's a little down the line because I have so many. I have a problem when it comes to books. I buy so many books and then...
That's what we've just talked about here today. You got a good summary of the book.
Awesome.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, I just have one last thing to say to you.
Oh my gosh. What is it now? Is it a hard question?
No.
Okay.
You are a VIP.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.